Welcome to the Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast Reverb, a conversation designed to help leaders go even further faster by digging deeper into this month's episode. I'm your host, Susie Gray. Last week, Andy had a fascinating conversation with Dr. Sharon Bergquist about stress. Not just how to avoid it, but how the right kind, the good kind of stress, can actually fuel our growth. There's one part of that conversation and her book in general that was so fascinating, and I really want to dig deeper on, and that's the role that stress plays in our physical health. From food diversity to exercise, there's so many ways to leverage good stress to live a longer, healthier, and happier life, but it doesn't always feel that that's easy to accomplish since those things take time and intentionality. Andy, there's so much in that book that was actionable and practical, and I just feel like we all left with so much to do and think about.
I told Sandra, I said, of all the guests we've had on the podcast, I can't think of anyone I've interviewed that left me with more things to do that I can't quit thinking about, that I implemented immediately because of the template that she gave us as it relates to stress and our success, stress and our health, stress and everything. Sandra and I, we've been working out. We've worked out with a trainer for years. Then our trainer moved, but still sends us stuff to do.
Workouts?
Yeah, I mean, she just moved an hour away. But one of the things she told us forever is you have to rest 1 minute between every single exercise. And we do high impact training. But I don't. I'm like, no, I want to get this done. Let's be efficient. I give myself so much credit for even doing it.
Right.
But after listening to Dr. Bergquist, that minute became maybe the most important minute or the most important minutes in my exercise routine. And that's just one example. So if you're listening to this and you didn't listen, if you didn't hear that interview, you really need to go back. But it really was profound at multiple levels in terms of work routine, exercise routine, food routine, everything. It was, before we started, you said it impacted things you and Jason are doing. What? I don't know if you can share.
Yeah, we actually listened to the book driving to New York, and we were listening to the thing about the 10-hour fasting and really creating very specific fasting intervals and how long that it has to be for your body to actually, your cell at the cellular level.
At the cellular level, that was what was so fascinating.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we both looked at each other and went, we can do this. We can do this now. And immediately, and we have access to a sauna at the Y that we work out at. Why don't we use the sauna? That's the
It's a waste of time. We got stuff to do.
I know, right? And so I loved what she said about the Japanese study with the people that walked 3 minutes and did fast walking for 3 minutes versus the people that just did their pace. And how much better the people that did that interval training. And I usually do HIIT 2 days a week, but it was like, should I do this more? Should I be doing only intervals?
Okay, so that walking thing, I know we got to get to the script.
Yeah.
And for our podcast listeners, bear with us for a moment. So Sandra and I walk. We have this incredible place where we can walk. And there's a side road that goes down a hill, and we just don't go down there because it's a dead end. Then you have to come back and we've done this walk for years. So we were talking about the book as we walked, and we get to this sort of off-ramp, a gravel road. It's just wonderful. And she said, let's walk down there and run back up. Now, Sandra never runs. I used to run all the time, 10Ks, half marathons, until my back couldn't take it anymore. And I'm like, are you kidding? She goes, no. I said, no, this would be great. It forces us to break this routine. So we walk down this hill. It's not super steep, but it's, we get to the bottom and ran back to the top. We definitely couldn't sing. We could barely talk. But again, the point being just the impact of that conversation, not to change routines for us, but to tweak some of our routines because of the science, some of which I've heard, but not what she talked about at the cellular level. It was fascinating.
So helpful. And you guys, you and Sandra eat so well. So the whole idea of the food diversity and the food toxins.
Yeah, the food toxin discussion, unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
So
we eat so many blueberries.
Well, you have a blueberry bush.
Multiple.
See?
Yeah.
It's perfect. You knew all along.
Yeah, and then dark chocolate. So,
Who doesn't want dark chocolate?
We tried to grow that. We can't. All right.
Lots of good options.
We have a script. Let's get to our script.
So, well, there's so many ways to go with this conversation.
Let's talk about how it relates to leaders, because she and I didn't really get to that much, but there's direct correlation.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good place to start. What happens when we try to lead while neglecting our physical body? Because the problem is it's easy to go, oh, I don't have time or I can't do this.
Well, we don't have time.
But if we don't do this, what's at risk?
Well, and the thing is, everything that I put in my notes, it's so obvious, almost doesn't need stating, but sometimes it needs stating, and if nothing else, I'm going to get a lot out of this conversation, right? But I mean, come on, if you ignore your body, you undermine your own future.
That's right.
Right? There's no future without a body, right? When I was in seminary and graduate school studying theology, one of our favorite professors would say, I've never, it was mostly men in the room. So it was men, he would say men, not many women in seminary back then. He would say, men, I've never seen anyone with a spiritual ministry without a physical body.
Yep.
And so, it's true. We undermine our own future. Ignoring our health is robbing ourselves of potential to do the things that we want to do in the future. I saw this cartoon, this was years ago at a gym, and it was a cartoon of a doctor, and he's in an examining room with a patient, and the doctor says to the patient, so, Mr. Thompson, what works better for you in your schedule? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? It's like,
I think I'll take the...
Yeah, and while we're talking about health, ignoring our health, we undermine our own future, both our mental health and our physical health. And both are so important, and both require a routine, and both require this positive stress. But the negative stress hits us mentally and physically, and so we become anti-stress. And that was the value of this book, The Stress Paradox, that there's a way to leverage the positive stress. And all of our podcast listeners, you need some kind of fitness routine, a mental routine, and a physical routine. The physical routines are easy to find. But in terms of mental routine, and she didn't talk about this specifically, and many of you listening know more about this than I do, but we all have sort of this sounds so trite, kind of a happy place, a place that refuels us mentally. Years ago, I heard Rick Warren say, hey, if you work with your hands, then your off time, you need to work with your mind. If you work with your mind, then your off time, you need to work with your hands. I just remember thinking, that is so helpful. And the reason he said it, I was actually at his house, and he showed me his garden. And I'm like, Rick Warren, the gardener? What? I
can't know.
I can't picture it. And he said, no. He said, because I work all day, I do mind work. He prepares and studies and speaks, And he's like, I come home and here's my garden. I'm like, that makes so much sense.
Wow.
So everybody needs some sort of anti-routine, that helps our mental health. Anyway, so the point is, if we don't get this right, and if we don't find the routines, if we don't figure out how to leverage positive stress, we're working against ourselves. Definitely. And I think everybody listening, including the two of us, we've experienced that.
Definitely.
Because we love what we do, and nobody loves to do the things they need to do, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, it's interesting you talk about mental health because I do think, exercise in particular, there is something that is a mental boost.
Totally.
When you walk out of the gym and you're like, I did it.
Yeah.
It was hard and I did it, and you're walking out and you're like, best hour of my day.
Yeah.
When you're walking in, maybe it doesn't feel that way, but when you're walking out, just the mental boost of, one, it's accomplishment, but two, there's endorphins.
Okay. Endorphins is so important, but let me back up because she didn't talk about this specifically, but you just touched on something. Based on the science, the discipline of forcing ourselves to walk into a gym does something to our cells.
Yeah.
Because anytime we do a hard thing for a moment or a hard thing for a period of time,
an hour,
and then step back. So even the mental exercise of doing something, making ourselves do something we don't want to do, there is value in that, not just what we do when we get there.
Absolutely.
Because that's sort of the seesaw of this whole thing she talked about that was so helpful.
So helpful.
And you're exactly right. After we do it, Sandra and I say all the time, why is it so hard to convince ourselves to
go do it?
And it's in our basement. We don't even have to drive anywhere. It's ridiculous. And so, we have this joke at home where I say, I'm just going to go down there and stretch. I'm not going to go down there and do hard things because I know if I get down there, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, because if you're going to spend the time, you're going to get in it and do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Probably most people listening, because we have a very educated, disciplined audience, we have found. And so you probably all have got this down. But it was just, again, the science behind this was so motivating. So,
Well, why do you think, because, I mean, we all listen to what Dr. Berquist said and what we're talking about. And we're like, yeah, of course you need to do that.
Yeah.
But why is it such a struggle as leaders in particular?
yeah. Well, you sent me that question ahead of time, and here's some of the things I wrote down. And again, our podcast listeners, you probably have a good answer to this as well. I think part of it is I pay, just in my work, and I think for everybody, we pay an immediate price for not getting everything done at work.
Yeah.
There's an immediate price to pay.
Yeah.
In some cases, there's an immediate reward. Sometimes the reward is later. But if I don't get my work done, and in my case, every 7 days is Sunday, so I can't postpone Sunday.
It's coming whether you like it or not. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So there's an immediate price to pay for not getting everything done at work. But there's an eventual price to pay for neglecting my health.
Yeah.
And for all of us, immediate tends to win out over eventual.
Yeah.
So this is part of the struggle. There's something right in front of me that if it doesn't get done, there's a price to pay.
Yeah, you'll feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, either I'm going to have to do it later, I'm going to eat up my weekends doing it. And the other thing too, kind of a general principle, we all tend to economize on what's most important and prioritize what's most urgent. That we economize on the things that are most important, and I'll give you some examples in a minute, and then we prioritize what's most urgent because it's urgent. And here's kind of the overarching principle behind all of this. We can cram for what's most urgent. You think about the things that are most urgent, you can cram, but you can't cram for what's most important.
Yeah.
It's the law of the final exam versus the law of the harvest. I mean, you can cram for an exam, you can't cram for a harvest.
Right.
But when it comes to the harvest, you got to plant at a certain time, you got to water, you got to fertilize,
Small
you got to wait.
deposits.
Exactly. It's those small deposits over time. So what happens is we end up trying to cram for the things that are most important. It never works.
Never can work.
And we are small deposits over time sometimes for the things that are most urgent where we could cram. I'll just admit, I have hurt myself rushing exercise.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah, but I always get hurt when I rush.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to
Gotta get it in.
I'm trying to economize on something that is law of the harvest. Where at the same time, when we get the rhythm of the things that are most important in our lives, we have more energy and mental capacity to cram for the things that are urgent. Because we're going to get those things done. So anyway, again, you can cram for an exam, you can't cram for law of the harvest. And the law of the harvest, planting, fertilizing, watering, waiting, the law of the harvest really is the operating system behind what's most important or what should be most important. Because the law of the harvest is what determines the health of our marriages, our relationships with our kids. It determines our health. In most cases, it determines our finances. Again, it's those small deposits over time.
Yeah.
In my line of work, unfortunately, through the years, I've met with so many men who want a quick fix for a marriage, want a quick fix for their relationship with their teenage son or daughter. People come in, they want a quick fix for their finances. And they're basically saying, help me, show me, give me a shortcut. I want to cram.
Show me how to make up for these 16 years I've
I've
invested in a relationship with my son or daughter.
And you cannot, you just can't do it.
Can't do it.
So anyway, law of the harvest, law of the final exam, we got to get things in proper order. And again, when we're taking care of our mental health and physical health, we are in a better position for all those other things anyway.
Definitely, for sure. The reality is our choices about our health don't just affect us, do they?
No. Everybody that has to work with us has to deal with our bodies, with our mental stability, with our temper, with our energy. Some of the best leadership advice I've ever received was a leader who said, the best thing you can bring to your team, Andy, is your energy. And you've worked with me for so long.
Yeah.
You've met with me when I had energy and when I didn't. And when I don't, you have to compensate for it. Because you're sitting there, I don't know, we've never talked about this, so let's talk about it in front of the whole audience. You're sitting there thinking, he's not having a great day. I've got to, you're having to navigate, right?
What things do I just want to wait to ask for the next time we meet?
Yeah, and same with Diane, my admin assistant is like, let's not talk about the calendar
anymore. Let's not talk about that today.
Right. Well, how unfair. So it's really selfish, but since I'm the boss, you're not going to say that. You're just going to think it until we are talking about it live with an audience. Anyway. Okay, but let me stay on this for just a second. And again, for all of our leadership podcasts, if you're engaged or you're married, this is so important. In fact, I did a whole series on this called The Responsibles.
Yep.
Refusing to take care of our health is so selfish because who do I expect to take responsibility for my irresponsibility later on? Sandra.
Who's going to take care of you?
Exactly.
Sandra.
It's so irresponsible. And when I talked about this in a message, there was like a low hum. I knew that every single married couple, one of them wanted to look at the other and say, see there,
Listen.
I keep trying to encourage you to exercise, encourage you. You're like, well, whatever, but for better, for worse, that's part of our marriage vows for many of us. You're actually planning for worse.
Definitely.
If you're not taking care of your mental health and your physical health. So if you're neglecting your health, I dare you, this is kind of extreme, to go home today and tell your spouse, hey, I'm not going to prioritize my mental and physical health, but I expect you to take care of me later, when the crop doesn't come in.
Right. When the chips fall where they're going to.
Yeah, and none of us would do that. But it's really...
effectively what you're doing.
Yes, it is not love.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
the other place I've seen this play out, our trainer who I mentioned earlier, she's in her mid-60s, and she can deadlift. I saw her deadlift like 350 pounds. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And she's this little petite woman. It's like crazy. Anyway, she told me when we first met her, she said, most of the people who come to my studio are grandparents. Some of them new grandparents who realize they cannot get down on the floor and play with they won't be able to get down on the floor and play with their grandchildren when their grandchildren are not babies anymore.
Right.
Or men who come in and say, I went to my grandson's ball game and I sat down in the low fold-up chair and somebody had to pull me up.
Wow.
So again, you neglect over time, and then you pay a price. That was very motivating to me. Honestly, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, because you have 4 grandkids now.
Yes, so
you have a lot to play with.
I found this. I found there were 2. I follow all these crazy Instagram accounts now as it relates to all this stuff, and so. There's 2 or 3 ways to get down on the floor and back up without using your hands.
Yeah.
But it requires flexibility. So that became one of my new goals is watch this, Sandra. I don't, no hands.
No hands.
All right.
That's good.
But again, to do less than that, it's selfish.
And can be irresponsible.
And it is the law of the harvest. You lose your flexibility, you cannot cram. So anyway.
So let's make this really, really practical as we close this episode for our audience. What's the best place to start? In other words, if longevity is the goal, what's the best starting habits that we can build today?
One of the things that we have illustrated without saying is information is so inspiring.
Yeah.
So to get started, you could read the book we've been talking about, The Stress Paradox by Dr. Berkowitz. It will motivate you. Information is inspiring and motivating. But secondly, for those of you who have a routine, stick with it and make sure you're not economizing on the routine. Again, you can cram for an exam. You can't cram for these small deposits over time. So if you're going to do the work, especially physical exercise, do the work right. Get somebody to make sure, that you're doing it right. Don't just go in there and feel better because you showed up at the gym. And I think most of our listeners understand that. And then the other thing is some sense of accountability as it relates to these things, whether it's somebody that we exercise with, somebody that we're in a book club with, somebody that we walk with, that sense of companionship and the habits that make the biggest difference. Again, that's the advantage of having a trainer is somebody's waiting for you and somebody's going to make you do the work. And we all want to say, oh, I don't need that. I'm disciplined. But
it's so helpful.
It's so helpful. Even if for a short period of time, it can be expensive. But to make sure we're doing those things right, it's super important. And then I think just to remember, and I've said it 3 times, we can't cram for the things that are most important. So urgent is going to feel like it should be the priority. But the things that are most important rarely feel like a priority. But if we don't do the work in terms of how we're investing in leadership at work or investing in family at home, there's a price to pay for that. And this is the really bad news in all this. There are some things that you can't make up for. There are some things you can't get back. There are some things that really can't be fully repaired, just patched up. So now is the time to dig in, to create these habits, commit to them for the sake of what's happening in the marketplace and for the sake of what's happening at home.
That's so good. Well, Andy, thank you so much for having this conversation. And thanks to all of our listeners. If you found this helpful, be sure to leave a review or pass it along to another leader. And as always, subscribe wherever you listen and check out andystanley.com/podcast for more resources to help you go even further, faster.